Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for this AuthorAID webinar on hot topics in publishing ethics. So we're really glad that you can all be here today. Just before we start, I'm just going to go through some of the housekeeping rules just for Zoom etiquette. So we will be recording this session, and participation in this session is your consent for the recording. But if you do have a problem with that, feel free to email me at abat@inasp.info and we'll be able to sort something out for you. If you have any issues, technical issues, do let us know in the chat, or again, email me and I'll see what I can do to help you. To reduce background noise, we'll be muting everyone, and please do keep yourself on mute unless you're asking a question and you're selected by someone from the panel. And as well, if you'd like to ask a question, you can raise your hand using the participant panel at the bottom or post in the chat at any time and we'll be able to answer some questions for you. There will be some interactivity in this session as well using Mentimeter. So what we'll be doing is we'll be posting a link to menti.com and a code that you'll be able to use to interactively participate in polls during the session. And again, if you have any problems with that, please do let us know in the chat. But I'll just pass over to Alex now, who will be introducing our panel for today.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good day, wherever you are. Today, we have two great speakers who are going to be discussing plagiarism with us. First, we have Professor Olubukola Babalola from Northwest University in South Africa. And afterwards, we will hear from Dr. Farooq Rathore from the Armed Forces Institute of Rehabilitation Medicine. Okay, first we have Dr. Olubukola Oluranti Babalola. She is the Vice President of the Organization for Women in Science for the Developing World. She is an NRF-rated scientist with an MBA from the Northwest University Business School in South Africa. Olubukola trained at standard laboratories in Israel and South Africa as a postdoctoral researcher. She holds a PhD in molecular plant microbe interactions and has worked in the field for over 20 years. She is dedicated to developing capacity and has graduated 21 doctoral fellows, a score of master students, a gross of honor students, and has over 200 publications to her credit. Dr. Olubukola is a member of two Elsevier Journals editorial boards. She has won several accolades, including being a nominee for Gender Insight 2020. Today, she will talk about plagiarism, what it is, what types there are, and what are the punishments. Thank you, Dr. Babalola.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. I welcome each and every one of us to this meeting. And I promise you is a time worth spending together. As introduced, I'm Olubukola Oluranti Babalola, and I'll be speaking on an aspect relating to the what, the type, and the punishments for plagiarism. My colleague will handle the other aspects that I will not speak on. So when we say plagiarism, what is plagiarism? You know, actually, many people think of plagiarism as copying, like picking from another source, or you can say borrowing. But when you say copying or you say borrowing, you are really underestimating, you are disguising what plagiarism is really all about. Because plagiarism is is a grievous offense. But before we move further, I want us to quickly do a Mentimeter to size up our different institutes with regards to plagiarism checker. So we move to the Mentimeter. You can see in the chat, it says menti.com. Go to menti.com. In the chat, you can see it.
Yeah, so if you go to menti.com and enter code 32492012, you'll be able to participate in our poll, which you can see the results coming on the screen now.
Okay, maybe we should close the poll now. Thank you. We can see from that poll that it is even possible that I'm plagiarizing without knowing if such a checker is not in my institute. More or less, it's like probably I'm not even informed. I'm not aware that there is something like that. So it's good time we are here together to see, to learn more about it. So you are now aware. Even if your institute doesn't have it, you can talk to the respective authority about it, or discuss with the people in the university librarian or the institutional librarian. So if we look at Merriam-Webster dictionary, then we want to really define plagiarism. And according to the Merriam-Webster online dictionary, plagiarism means stealing and passing off someone else's idea or work as if it's yours. It also means stealing another person's production, and that is what we call literary theft. When you actually, take from other people without giving credit to the sources from where the work comes from. So it's like you are presenting the idea as if the idea is new. So in summary, we can say plagiarism is an act of fraud. It involves both stealing someone else's work and lying about it afterwards. So it's a grievous offense. Next slide, please. What does, because we keep saying other people's work, and what is this other people's work? Sometimes, for those of us in the university, we may be thinking in terms of writing. It's not about writing only. You can plagiarize music. You can plagiarize creative expression. You can plagiarize videos. So it's not only words that are being plagiarized. So when we refer to other people's work, we refer to the graphics, the strategies that is used, the original idea, the videos, the computer softwares, and the creative expression that are sort of stolen. So all these are important things that we should stay clear of. Next slide. So summarize what we have discussed, and to stay clear of them is, in a short form, is to to obey copyrights and to honor intellectual property, and giving credit to people whose work you have used, and establishing your own thought while writing, with also respecting academic honesty. So simply put, we are saying that we should cite the sources from where our works come from. So I want to now move to types of plagiarism. When you mention types of plagiarism, the more you read, the more types you will see. But all the different types of plagiarism that is being discussed could be grouped under either the sources are not cited, or the sources of the information were cited. And when the sources are cited, there could be many things going on as well that tantamount to plagiarism. And when the sources are not cited, there could be others also that tantamount to plagiarism. So I will be taking us through these different types of plagiarism. And I must mention that anyone who has written, or if you have graded any paper before, you will find out that it is very difficult, to pick out, because this issue of plagiarism is not always in black and white issue. So the boundary is very thin between plagiarism and research, and sometimes it is not a clear boundary. So learning to recognize the various types of plagiarism that there are is important because it will keep you from falling into the pit of plagiarism. If you look at the next slide, it's still also talking about types of plagiarism. This one puts it under different names, quite different from the one I showed earlier. The one I showed earlier is from the version from turnitin.com. And the next slide also, we show types of plagiarism also, and this one is from Total Assignment. But in all, I'm going to dwell on the one from the Turnitin. So let's go on. Yeah, when the sources are cited, there can also be plagiarism happening. So we can have it in different forms. But before I move on, I want us to have a Mentimeter first.
So using the same code and going to menti.com, again, you can go and participate in the second Mentimeter. And this is about the types of plagiarism. So let me just share the results of that.
I don't see any more poll coming in. Yeah, maybe we should close it. Thank you. When we turn in someone else's work as ours, it's easier to know that that is plagiarism. And then when we copy words or ideas or music or software information from someone else without giving credits, once you don't give the credit, it's clear it is plagiarism. And failing to put a quotation in quotation marks is an indication of plagiarism. I'm still discussing what we did in the Mentimeter. So giving incorrect information about the source of a quotation is plagiarism. In fact, everything in that last poll are all classified as plagiarism. And the one that I feel may cause people to be not to be determined is the one that is talking about copying so many words or ideas from a source that it makes up the majority of your work. So whether you give credit or not, so long as you have copied it substantially, it is plagiarism, because there is something that is called the fair use rule. We have to observe it, the fair use. And the fair use does not allow you to copy someone's work almost literally. So now let's look at what we have on the screen. when sources are cited, it is possible we also have what we call the ghost writer. I use the word ghost writer verbatim from Turnitin. And what is this ghost writer? In this case, the writer turns in another work, word for word, as his or her own. It is very dangerous. It is not allowed in academics. I mean, it's a violation of academic integrity. There is another one referred to by Turnitin as the photocopy. And with the photocopy, from the word, the writer actually copies. And the copy is in significant proportion to the extent that the amount lifted from a single source without alteration is overwhelming. That we refer to as the photocopy. Let's see next slide, and we'll see the one that is called the potluck paper. Just like we'll say potluck is a situation in which one must take a chance. In this case also, the writer is taking chance, and the writer really put effort to disguise plagiarism by copying. And now the copying, in this case, will be from different sources. And the writer will tweak the sentences to make them fit together while retaining most of the original phrasing. So it is not allowed. It is not allowed. The one on for these guys has to do with the writer altering the paper's appearance in form of changing the keywords, the phrases. But if you really look at it, you know, I said earlier, is a thin line. If you really look at it, you will know is a plagiarism in action. It is not allowed. So in the next slide, we'll see the one on the labor of laziness. The labor of laziness. And when you, from the way it is titled, the individual, the writer, takes time, good time, to paraphrase. The writer actually violates academic policy. You will see academic policy is violated because the writer successfully paraphrases and uses another person's idea, work, or whatever as his or her own. And the one that is clearer most is the self-stealer, also known as the self-plagiarism, in which case the writer will borrow substantial amount from his or her previous work and use it as if is a new one. All these different forms of plagiarism whereby the sources are not cited, but they are not good practices. They are unethical. We'll now look at the one where the sources are cited. Next slide. And when the sources are cited, you can also fall victim of being a plagiarist. How? For example, the one that is called the forgotten footnotes. In that case, you neglect to include specific information on the location of the material that you have referenced. Indirectly, you obscure source location, so no one could trace the work. It is not, it is an unethical practice. And we have the misinformer. The misinformer is going to give inaccurate information about the sources, making it impossible for anyone to find. All these are ways to disguise when an individual has kidnapped another person's expression or work. And academically, they are not good. More also, under the source cited, we have another one as seen in this next slide. It is called the too perfect phrase. And it is just too perfect. The problem here is that the writer will neglect to put in the quotation marks, and we falsely claim the original presentation and interpret it as if it's personal. And the one that is the resourceful citer, it's easier to become a resourceful citer because in the process of trying to avoid plagiarism, you actually cite the source, but you were cataloging judiciously without or with almost nothing new added to knowledge. Because this individual is, we copy from here, put the source, copy from there, put the source. It looks like any other well-researched document, but actually is a plagiarized work. So mere looking at all these, you'll see it is really, really a thin line. And one has to be very cautious so that one's good is not evil spoken of when it comes to research. I will like us to move to the next slide, and we'll see this one is talking about the perfect crime. We all know it doesn't exist. In this case, what I'm trying to say is that the writer properly quotes and cites sources in some places. However, he or she goes on to paraphrase other arguments from those sources without citations. This way, the writer really tries to pass off the paraphrased material as is or has. And you will agree with me from what we have said about the definition of plagiarism, that this is actually wrong, is unethical, is not allowed, and we should stay clear of such. Let's see, quickly take a Mentimeter. Can we have the Mentimeter? I think we have a substantial number of polls now. So we can just discuss and go back to the slides. Thank you. Actually, it's difficult sometimes, but I tell you, in determining whether or not plagiarism is a crime, we have to take our stand, because they say there is no ignorance. I mean, ignorance is not an excuse in law. So even if the smaller part of a work is found to have been plagiarized, it is still considered a copyright violation. Once the copyright is violated, it is plagiarism. So when we ask the question, does it matter? Does it matter how much was copied? In as much as copyright has been violated, it matters. And a work that is almost entirely plagiarized, or of course, will almost certainly incur greater penalties than a work that is only, that only includes a smaller amount of plagiarism. But in all, an offense has been committed, and it does matters. So now, if we say it matters, what then are the punishments that there are? We have punishment ranging from academic, legal, and institutional. In academic, it's possible that the individual will fail the grade. So for students, you should be aware, the individual may fail the grade depending on the institution now, the academic institution. Sometimes it could be a 0 returning for the assignment or the course that was done. It's also possible to be expelled from the academic institution, or to face disciplinary referral. So academics have punishment for plagiarism. And by the way, most colleges and universities have 0 tolerance for plagiarism. If you have looked at some of the pictures that I picked, you will say I picked them from university websites. And they are clamoring that plagiarism is a no-go area. In fact, the academic standard of intellectual honesty are often more demanding than governmental copyright law. Please take note of that. So a plagiarized paper almost always will result in failure for the assignment. And the legal aspect, most cases of plagiarism may be considered like a small offense, but on the long run, they are punishable by fines, and it could lead to 1 year in jail. So plagiarism can also be considered a felony under certain states. Let's look at the institutional punishments. With next slide, institutional punishments. And it's possible for the individual to miss out on his or her job and the position denied. The example that I put here in the picture, the professor was sacked over plagiarism of artwork. So these are grievous offenses. In moving on further to the next slide, I have used material from Turnitin and some of the places listed here. Yeah, next slide, please. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Babalola, for your interesting presentation. We will have a session of questions and answers at the end of the panel. Right now, we are going to hear from Dr. Farooq Rathore. Dr. Rathore works as an associate professor and rehabilitation medicine consultant at the Armed Forces Institute of Rehabilitation Medicine in Rawalpindi, Pakistan. Dr. Rathore is also the national representative of Pakistan for the International Society of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation, and a member of the Expert Advisory Panel on Rehabilitation for the World Health Organization. His expertise includes musculoskeletal disorders, rheumatologic disorders, and pediatric disabilities, with over 10 years of experience. Farooq provides mentoring, teaching, and training to medical students and other healthcare professionals on how to conduct and publish high-quality research. Today, Dr. Rathore will talk to us about how to detect scientific misconduct and avoid plagiarism. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Can you please confirm that you can hear my voice and see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen now.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'll start. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for being part of this webinar. And thank you, INES team, for asking me to give this talk. So I'm going to take from where my colleagues stopped, that I'm going to talk about the strategies that how can you avoid scientific misconduct and detect plagiarism. So as my colleague, as the chair of the session told you, that I'm based in Pakistan, which is a developing country. And a little bit about my background, that I have been trained and I work primarily in Pakistan, which is a developed country with low resources for research and writing, which means that many times I come across many instances, and many of my colleagues, my juniors, my students, and even my seniors, they ask me certain questions which indicate that probably we are not very much clear that what plagiarism is all about and how it can land you in trouble and can affect your careers as well. So I'm going to discuss some strategies which might help you in your careers and in your writing styles as well. So the first thing you need to understand, that whenever people do certain kind of scientific misconduct and plagiarism, they come up with certain reasons. Let me tell you, there are no reason for any unethical behavior. This is true both for professional and personal lives as well. There are only excuses. People want to fool themselves and they want to say, I conducted this thing in a wrong manner just because of this thing. But whatever you say, it's only an excuse and nobody is going to believe that. So some of the excuses that you might hear regarding plagiarism and scientific misconduct in medical writing is that, this topic was boring. This was assigned to me by my supervisor. I was not very much interested. I don't have any interest in this topic and just I wanted to get over with it. Okay. It is okay if I don't get caught, right? Because people say, fake it till you make it. And they say that we know certain people that also conduct plagiarism and scientific misconduct. And since they have not been detected so far, so probably I can also make it till I fake it till I make it. Then many people, specifically from a physician background, because they have to see a large number of patients and they have to attend a large number of OPDs. And at the same time, many of them, at least in the developing country, do not get some extra free time, dedicated time, or protected time for research and writing. And that's why some of them, they do this kind of plagiarism and scientific misconduct. And once they are caught, they say, we were so busy in attending patients and doing other hospital jobs that we did not get any time to conduct quality research. And that's why I engaged myself into plagiarism, copy pasting, and stuff like that. And, some people say, I have got to do research somehow. And they say the end justifies the mean. But please remember, in medical sciences, it is not true. The end does not justify the mean. The aim is not just to produce a paper with any mean possible. The aim is to produce a research paper or a dissertation or thesis by following certain ethical principles. You need to follow an ethical principle in order to complete your journey of research and writing. And it's very, very important. And last but not the least, I work in an environment where many people are already engaged in scientific misconduct, plagiarism, copy pasting, and stuff like that. So why should I be doing the right thing? No, it doesn't matter. Right thing is right, even if nobody else is doing it. And wrong will always be wrong if everyone else is committing it. So you need to follow the ethical principles. And you need to understand that excuses are the nails used to build the house of failure. And again, I would repeat, it applies both to your professional and personal life as well. Always hold yourself to higher ethical standards. Always try to follow the norms, the good norms that had been clearly delineated in different guidelines all around the globe and being followed by different organizations. And that's why, and that's how you're going to write a good article that is going to not only get published in an international biomedical literature, but hopefully would get cited and would give you prestige and sense of honor as well. But at the same time, we also need to understand that people are not inherently bad. They don't want to commit only plagiarism and scientific misconduct. there are certain contributory factors that have been studied in literature which point that what could be the possible reason for which people, specifically people based in the developing countries, they sometimes willingly or unwillingly do this plagiarism. So the most important that has been identified is the pressure to publish. And, you know, everyone talks about this mantra, publish or perish. And, you know, people have to publish a certain number of articles in order to get to the next degree program and in order to get to the next promotion tenure career. So this is something that has led to a rat race where everyone wants to publish more and more. And then some of them, they think that why should we actually do the right thing? It's a rat race. I have been pressurized to do this thing, so I'm going to get an article or dissertation by any means possible. And then they get into this plagiarism and scientific misconduct. So the first thing is pressure to publish. Second thing is lack of training. And those of you who might be placed in the developed world, or maybe in Northern America, Europe, maybe Japan, Australia, you might be wondering, so what's the big deal? All universities train their students. The answer is no. The training programs, specifically in the developing countries, are very variable. So in some institution, yes, there is really good quality training available, not only in medical research and writing, but also the ethical aspect of publication ethics and how to conduct quality research. But in many institutions, either the training is totally lacking or the training is of very low quality. So yes, lack of training is a major contributory factor for which people commit plagiarism unintentionally. Apart from that, we all know that English is the global language of science. Majority of the scientific literature, whether biomedical, whether social sciences, computer sciences, agricultural sciences, environmental sciences, it is being published in English language. So whether we are not proficient and well versed in English language, we need to understand the nuances of the language and to know how to write English in a better form. And since many of us are not native English speakers, so we do have a challenge while we are writing articles and dissertation, thesis, and scientific report in English language. I'm not saying that it gives you an excuse to commit plagiarism, but unfortunately, this sometimes becomes a contributory factor when specifically it is combined with this thing, attitude toward plagiarism and influence of cultural values. And again, a disclaimer, I am myself based in Pakistan, which is an Eastern culture or Eastern country, right? I'm not saying that, you know, there's something wrong with our cultures. I'm simply saying that, you know, in our Eastern cultures, maybe Pakistani, Indian, Bangladesh, even Japanese culture and Chinese culture, there's a norm that, you know, we tend to read things and then we tend to reproduce those things exactly verbatim because it is considered to be an honor to remember things said by great people. But it does not work this way in scientific language when you are writing an article for an English biomedical journal. You have to paraphrase that thing in your own language. So sometimes this conflict actually leads to instance of unintentional plagiarism. So these are the different contributory factors which can actually result in unintentional plagiarism. And that's why we need to be vigilant about them. And if we think that we are committing any one of these, we should actually correct ourselves. Now coming to the second part, that how to avoid plagiarism. Once we are very much clear that what are the different types of plagiarism, why it is wrong and why it should be avoided, and what are the different contributory factors that contribute toward this thing. So now how can we avoid plagiarism? On a lighter note, this would have been an ideal situation. Length of my nose is directly proportional to the number of plagiarized articles that I have published. This is the famous picture of Pinocchio. Pinocchio used to lie, and as a result, his nose used to grow. So, I mean, it's on a lighter note, but this is not the reality and it's not going to happen. And that's why we need to understand what are the different strategies which can help you avoid plagiarism and scientific misconduct. Again, a little bit of disclaimer. This is not a comprehensive list because, you know, in these 20 minutes, I tried to identify the most important resources and strategies that might help anyone, specifically those based in developing countries, to make best use of these resources. So the first thing is that I would like to advise is please learn about different form of scientific misconduct and plagiarism. That is self-training. I know that at least in developing countries, most of the focus of training is on the methodological aspect, statistics, the designing of the study, how to collect data, how to analyze data, and how to present the results. There is not so much emphasis on the ethics and the scientific misconduct part of doing a research. But that does not mean that if you are not trained adequately, it gives you an excuse to do plagiarism. The answer is no, because most of us are adults, and there's a principle of SDL, self-directed learning, which means that I am responsible for my own learning. After a certain time, I do not need that kind of guidance that a kid needs. I need to know what is right, what is wrong, how will I get the guidance, and then I need to follow the norms. And just I will give you a couple of good websites, and I would strongly recommend you to please go online after the webinar and explore them in your own time. Each one of them I would consider a treasure of resources, and these are different kind of resources coming from different part of the world, which means it would give you a different kind of ideas from different people. So the most important, which I personally feel is very important, is Office of Research Integrity. It is being managed by National Institute of Health, USA, one of the largest funder and conductor of biomedical research all around the globe. So they have a guide to ethical writing, which clearly lays out the plan, what is right, what is wrong, and what are the different definitions and examples of, for example, fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. So please go online and explore this resource. The next is Committee on Publication Ethics. It is basically based in the UK, but it's a global organization. And thousands of journals all around the globe, mostly the English journals, they are part of this Committee on Publication Ethics. This Committee on Publication Ethics issues certain guidelines and definitions of different things, that what is appropriate ethical authorship, what is inappropriate authorship, what is unethical way of writing, what is ethical way of writing, what is paraphrasing, what is insufficient paraphrasing, and so many things. And the most important thing is that most of their resources are free of cost to access for everyone all around the globe. And they have many case scenarios as well, which can help you understand the details of how they determined that whether something was ethical or unethical. The next resource I would like to share is National Science Foundation, again of USA. Again, it's a very big organization, and their section on misconduct has many good resources that would help you understand the details of plagiarism and how to avoid scientific misconduct. The scientific misconduct blog known as retractionwatch.com is pretty famous all around the globe. And this is again a great resource because what they do basically, they collate different kind of instances of scientific misconduct, retraction, duplication, and blacklisting of different authors from all around the globe, and they actually display all these stories in form of a blog on retractionwatch.com. You might say that, you know, some of the retraction which they display might not are debatable. That's fine. You can actually go in detail and debate with them, but it gives you an idea on how different people are working specifically on detecting plagiarism and scientific misconduct. And just to give you an example, because many of the people who are involved in detecting scientific misconduct are using AI, artificial intelligence. So there are at least a couple of examples on Retraction Watch in which they were able to detect duplication of articles and other form of scientific misconduct, which was more than 2 decades old. So you need to understand that the technology is evolving at a very fast pace. So there's a possibility that in the next couple of years, the technology is going to become so strong that it actually might pick up plagiarism or scientific misconduct that was done decades ago. So don't do things at this stage that are going to haunt you at a later stage when you will be higher in the academic echelon. Monash University is located in Australia, and their section on academic integrity is again excellent and highly recommended. UK Research Integrity Office, ukrio.org is again a very important resource that I would like you to explore in your own time. The next thing is, I hope and I'm sure that many of my colleagues are actually at a higher academic echelon. They are professors who are attending this webinar. So to those, I would request that they should do it right now. And for those who are students, resident, and youngsters, one day I really hope you are going to become really big time administrator, and you are going to bring the change that is much needed. So I would request that whenever you get a chance, try to create ORIs, Office of Research Integrity. Try to create your own policies and try to implement them. The biggest issue with many institutions is that they have really good fancy policies which are placed on paper, but they don't implement them in true spirit and letter and spirit. So whenever you get a chance, whenever you're an administrator, if you're a professor, if you head a department, try to integrate all these good practices in your department and institution, and probably you can actually bring a positive change in your own department. Moving forward, again, something that actually leads to plagiarism is actually lack of planning. At least I know a couple of my colleagues who are enrolled in a 3 or a 4-year program, degree program, and they start working on their research in the last year. So why didn't you plan ahead? You had 3 years or 4 years to complete your research and then publish it. So why you are starting in the last 12 months and now you are short of time and you would be forced to go for the shortcuts, and many of these shortcuts include plagiarism, copy pasting, and scientific misconduct. So please plan ahead and do not rush your scientific assignments. Another important aspect that needs a little bit of clarification is cite the statistics and facts without the source unless they are common knowledge. Don't get confused. I'll give you an example. So for example, if I say the sky is blue, I mean, it's a common knowledge. Everyone knows the sky is blue. You don't need to give a reference to a scientific or environmental sciences book for that. But if I say the atmosphere is made up of 98% oxygen, 1% carbon dioxide, and 1% nitrogen, this is a hardcore scientific fact. I have to quote and source this thing, right? Another example for my colleagues based in biomedical sciences or physician. We all know that ulnar nerve lies behind medial epicondyle, right? It lies here, the medial side of your arm, of your elbow. It's a common knowledge. You don't need to give a reference for that. But if you say the ulnar neuropathy at the elbow is the second most common neuropathy in the upper limbs, it's a hardcore scientific fact. You have to justify that, and then you have to give a source or a citation or reference for that. And last but not least, whenever you complete your manuscript, your scientific report, your dissertation, your thesis, you must scan it by an appropriate plagiarism detection software before you submit it to your university or to the journal. Now, in many good universities and institutions, they would provide you with an access, or the librarian would actually run the plagiarism detection software for you, and they would generate a beautiful report of Similarity Index. That's great if your organization provide you with that kind of support. But I just told you, many of the organizations based in the developing country do not offer all these kind of services, which many of my colleagues take for granted. So for those, I would recommend you should still go online and try to use the free alternative. Now, the problem is the free alternatives are not that as good as, let's say, Authenticate or Turnitin. But instead of not scanning your plagiarism, the good approach would still be to scan your plagiarism by an appropriate free online plagiarism detection software. It might be Attributor, Viper, Plagium, Whitesmoke, or the free version of Grammarly, and you can share your experience in the chat box as well. And whenever you scan your article or your dissertation thesis through this plagiarism detection software, they don't like mark it as plagiarized thing. They use the word Similarity Index. That something is similar to the. Sorry, Gurpreet, can you? Thank you. So Similarity Index, the concept of Similarity Index is that, there are certain things that cannot be like written in a new form. Again, the same example. Ulnar nerve lies behind medial epicondyle. Whatever alternative you can think of this particular sentence, all of these have already been used hundreds, if not thousands of times in the literature. So if you use this word, it would be highlighted as Similarity Index. It does not mean that it is a plagiarized thing. And that's why it's a job of the editor or maybe the person who is reviewing your report to see whether it is a true plagiarism, that is copy paste, or it is simply a case of Similarity Index. And usually this is how it looks like, the report. So this is a Turnitin originality report. This has got a Similarity Index of 94%, which is absolutely not acceptable, which means this is a truly plagiarized document. And they actually give you the source from which things have been plagiarized. So you need to understand that technology is working and expanding at a rapid pace. And these things, they do get caught. And a little bit of plagiarism can actually be caught by simply running a search through google.com. So don't do things that are going to haunt you in the end. So I have only 3 take-home messages for you. First of all, ignorance of law is not an excuse. If you have started writing an article, working on your research, on your thesis dissertation, please do not say that I did not know what were the good things to do and what was the bad scientific misconduct that needed to avoid. You learned about the scientific content, you learned about the methodology, you learned about statistics, result analysis. You need to learn about scientific misconduct and plagiarism as well. It's your own responsibility, because each one of us is responsible for our own action in personal and professional life, and people are going to ask us for our wrongdoings as well. And please avoid unethical and questionable practices both in personal and professional life. If you are in any doubt, please go online and explore the resources that I shared, or please go to someone senior, someone who is an expert in ethics, or please go online and connect to a mentor on AuthorAID. And the last thing is, there are only 2 ways of spreading light. to be the candle or the mirror that reflects it. These AuthorAID webinars are an excellent resource of education and knowledge. So I would recommend that please go out and spread the good word. Whatever knowledge you have gathered by these two presentations, please go out and explore it more and try to disseminate and share with your colleagues who were unable to attend this webinar. I thank you all very much again. And this is my email. If you need a copy of the presentation, I'll be glad to share with you, and please email me. So thank you very much again.
Thank you, Dr. Rathore, for your interesting presentation. We have 10 minutes for questions, and I have gathered some questions to read for our speakers, Dr. Rathore and Dr. Babalola, to answer. The first question was posed by a couple of the participants, both by James Onyuro and by Cynthia, and they're asking whether there is an acceptable threshold for plagiarism or an acceptable range for a Similarity Index.
Thank you. The important thing, because I also read the questions that are in the chats, attribution is important, citing the source, giving credit to the owner of the original work. They are quite important. And if you go by the one I've seen in the two questions in the chat, asking that, oh, even after I've cited the source, am I safe? Don't forget, when I was discussing types of plagiarism, I grouped them under two as used by Turnitin. That it is even possible you cite the source and at the same time you have plagiarized. So you have to go and check, have you been have you come in as a misinformer or too perfect phraser or resourceful citer or as the forgotten footnotes? So if those ones are not there and you have given credit to the necessary to the original owner, then I think you are safe. Thank you.
Dr. Rathore?
Okay. Yeah. So again, the first thing is I would like to rephrase the question. This question by Cynthia, what is the accepted range for Similarity Index, is correct. Please remember, there is no exception and there is no accepted range for plagiarism. Plagiarism is wrong for all reasons. You can talk of Similarity Index. I gave you an example. It all depends on the organization and on the journal. For example, I'll give you an example. In the university which I'm working, they would allow a Similarity Index of 12%. And a journal where I work as a sub-editor allows a Similarity Index of 16%. So first of all, you should go and see the instruction to author. So it's not possible that you can write an article that is 100% Similarity Index free, because many sentences and phrases have been used in the literature already, and our aim is not to copy paste them. But the word plagiarism and the way our colleague explained that is totally not acceptable. So please explore the instruction to author to tell you how much of Similarity Index is allowed.
Thank you very much, doctors. The next question was posted by Anofrin Shrima, and they ask, provided someone has cited the sources correctly, does that person be on a safe side of not being a plagiarizer?
Provided you provide the attribution and you have also tried to look at the, you see the way I explained in my site, in the slides rather, and you have avoided falling into those pitfalls, then I think you are safe.
Thank you. Dr. Rathore?
Yeah, okay. So again, there are two things. First of all, citations are important, but you need to understand that whatever you cite, you should paraphrase it correctly. So you simply can't go online and take off a couple of sentences from different resources and simply say, I combined them together and I have given all references. No. So there are two things to understand. You have to paraphrase them in your own word, and you have to correctly cite and quote them as well. So there are two things that they should not be confused.
Thank you very much. The next question was posted by Rob Mercus, and he asked, what about material that is open access?
Materials that are open access, and let me say material in the public domain, if the work are no longer protected by copyrights or never have been, then they are considered free for use. That means you can freely borrow materials of such material and use them without the fear of plagiarism. But even then, you still have to cite the source and make the proper attributions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rathore.
Yeah, totally agree with my colleague, because open access means that you have an open access to those kind of material. You can use them, reuse them, but the problem remains there. You have to quote, cite, and attribute. That's the most important lesson of this presentation. Simply just, it is an open access and you can access it without any barriers does not mean that you simply copy paste and then start using it by your own name. You still have to attribute it.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have about 5 more minutes, and I see that Yusuf has their hand raised. So can you please ask your question?
And yeah, madam, thank you so much. You know what I wanted? I want to know exactly if at all, as I borrow something from internet, how will that affect my research? I know I got from the internet some information and then made part of my research. This is, and at the same time, will that affect as a plagiarism or what? May I know further details on that? If at all that internet information can affect my research. Thank you.
When we pick information from the internet, we are supposed to put the web address and the date that you access that web. In case something happens and the content changes, you have to cite the web address and the date that you picked from that web. And even then, you are not allowed to use it verbatim, except in a case where you put in the quote, as earlier described, when you put it in quote. So all these things still boils down to the same thing. And the fact that it is on the internet doesn't mean we can just use it without citing source. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rathore, would you like to contribute?
No, it was a very comprehensive answer. I agree with my colleague.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have time for one more question. Okay, we have 2 in the chat from Dominic. It's more like a comment. He says the citation and referencing is good for the writer. It shows how widely the author has consulted other materials and that they did not write from their subjective views. And it protects the author, assuming the quotation is false. What do you think about this comment?
Yeah, it's correct that it shows how widely the author has consulted. But at the same time, we are not to just be resourceful citer, like the example I gave, because you have to contribute to knowledge. You cannot just be cataloging. And you know, nowadays, even without going to library, near sitting by your computer, you may want to write a review article with even all the references belonging to 2021. The resources are available. But if you are not careful, you will not add anything to knowledge, because you just say this story, you put the reference, another story, put the reference. So resourceful cataloging also can put you into the trouble of plagiarism without adding contribution to knowledge. And the second aspect says it protects the author. Yeah, but you cannot write all your statement and put everything in quotes. Then what have you added to knowledge? So it's like you are just reinventing the wheel. The documents are there already. You are only reinventing the wheel. So care needs to be taken also. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay. Unfortunately, we still have 1 more minute, and I have one last very interesting question in the chat. And it says, how far can one go in paraphrasing someone's original work without losing the essence and at the same time not seen as plagiarizing even after citing the source or giving credit to the original author?
I will refer this person to read material on fair use. fair use, because it's enormous and it's going to give you, it's like an eye opener. It's going to enlighten you on issue about fair use.
Sorry, Dr. Rathore, any questions on that last, any comments on that last question?
Yeah, this paraphrase again, this paraphrasing, I can actually share my story that, being a non-native English speaker, I always had issues with paraphrasing appropriately. And this is a question I often get asked, how can we paraphrase appropriately, again, without losing the essence, stuff like that. And my answer usually is, writing is an art, it's a skill. And as we become expert in a skill by repeatedly doing it, so my recommendation is, keep on doing, and, maybe you might want to paraphrase, unrelated things in order to gain experience on how to appropriately paraphrase that. Because there's no criteria you can say, here I'm losing the essence and here I'm not losing it. It is a skill that you learn by repeatedly doing that. And as non-native English speakers, we need to understand that this is a challenge that we are going to face, and probably not our colleagues who are native English speakers. So there's no red line where you can demarcate losing the essence, not losing the essence. It's all about becoming more expert in paraphrasing by repeatedly doing it.
Thank you very much. On that note, I think we don't have any more time for questions. Now I am going to refer to Alaka, who is going to tell us how to access the presentation and how to contact the presenters if you have more questions. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you very much, Alex. And so I'll be sharing the recording by email after today's session shortly, and the discussion will be continuing on our Google Groups forum, which I'll also share the link in the email as well. You can also follow us on social media, on our Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and have a look at the AuthorAID website as well for more information. But a big thank you very much to our speakers today for taking time out of their schedules to participate in this webinar, and especially to Alex as well for chairing this event. So if you have any more questions, please do feel free to reach out via the channels. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great end of the day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.